Bernie O'Neill. I'm facilitating this evening, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm the co-convener of A Better Urbadella, which is a community forum dedicated to achieving open, accountable and responsive government in the Urbadella. We've been operating since September 2019. We're a non-aligned group. It's the second forum I've facilitated for the Tuross Head Progress Association. I'd like to thank them for the opportunity. I just reiterate Kathy's point about asking that all participants, anyone who speaks, anyone who's in this room, are respectful of everyone else in the room, and that people are not interrupted when they're speaking. We'll be strictly sticking to time limits to maximise the number of questions and the opportunity for all candidates to speak. We've got 3 minutes for the candidates' opening statements, which we'll go to shortly. There'll be a warning bell for 2 minutes, and then for questions, there is a 2-minute limit on each reply, and there will be a bell at 2 minutes. A number of the questions that are being asked that we have listed or are likely to come from the floor may not necessarily be answered by all candidates. There's no expectation that the candidates have to answer all the questions. That's up to you. So we'll see how that goes. We'll try and get through the maximum number of questions that we can, but given time constraints, there may be questions that we don't get to. They'll be taken on notice and submitted to candidates, and Tuross Head Progress Association and the Bega will publish all those responses. So we're going to, the way the evening will work is we're going to start with the candidate statements, as I said. We then have a set of questions that have been submitted to the Tuross Head Progress Association, and those questioners are either in the room or Kathy will ask the questions. And then we'll take some questions from the floor. I actually have some questions on a list that people have submitted to ask from the floor. So I've got a fair few questions, which is great. Our first candidate that's going to speak is, and I will ask all candidates to introduce themselves, and if they are representing a political party, to introduce themselves and the party that they're representing. The first candidate that's going to speak is Ursula Bennett. Ursula has chosen not to show an exemption to not wear a mask, so she's standing outside. She's going to speak to you through the window. She won't be able to take questions in this format, but her introductory statements, her 3-minute introduction, will be given through this window.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Ursula Bennett. I'm one of the independent candidates for this election. And a couple of years ago, I was travelling to Victoria with a friend of mine while we still could. And she was telling me how at school they learned that our preferential voting system would always benefit the major parties. And I, not having grown up in Australia, did not have this prejudice, and I just did some numbers in my head, and I thought, no, that's not quite right, especially with our optional preferential voting that we have in New South Wales. So I'm standing as an independent candidate to give you, the voters, the opportunity to vote for someone who hopefully will represent your values, but has no connection to the major parties. So you can leave the major parties right off your ballot paper, and you still have some people to vote for. That the major parties have failed us, I believe, is obvious to most. And I would consider it vain hope to think that because one major party has failed in delivering infrastructure promises, that the other one will do a better job. I believe we need to go back to our democracy, representing the needs of the people and operating within the parameter of our federal constitution. This is a document worth protecting, and it has served us well for 120 years. My husband and I have been in this Urbadella area for 34 years. We have raised 9 children here. Apart from our involvement in local churches, we have been part on the fringes, but still part of community groups like Access for All. We have, as a family, fundraised for the Maria Bike Path 20 years ago. I was 10 years a telecross volunteer, and I also served 2 years on the Maria Hospital Advisory Board. I have previously stood at various New South Wales elections on a pro-family and Christian value platform, and that part of my candidacy has not changed. However, I believe at this stage it is important to address the unlawfulness of the mandates. Never in history have people been forced to either not work, not travel, or be part of general society because they chose not to take a medical treatment. To coerce, to bully, and to force people into this treatment without them wanting to is shifting the focus from infection control to tyrannical government. Especially for children, my heart goes out to the parents who've lost children through vaccine injuries, that have trusted their doctors and authorities and lost their children. Thank you and God bless.
Okay, I'm just going to hand the mic starting from this end, starting with Michael. I should say we have one other candidate who can't make it this evening, who's Victor Hazier of the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers. So that's the gap, the candidates, but the rest are all here. So I'll start with Michael Holland.
Thank you everyone. I'm Michael Holland. I'm New South Wales Labor candidate for this Bega by-election, as you can see. Many of you know me already as a local. I've been a specialist obstetrician gynaecologist and have provided care for women and families for in the area from Ulladulla down to Eden for 19 years now. I'm a senior lecturer at the Australian National University, and that teaching and all medical teaching I've provided pro bono. Not only with that, I've been responsible for the clinical and financial governance of a specialist medical practice for over 30 years, and governance in clinical governance in major teaching hospitals. I live just down the road, Talinga, and I've been to many of these candidates forums involving local, state and federal elections. Now, for the past 19 years I've worked here. I've advocated for health during the whole time. I've seen the transition of maternity services during a crisis just after I arrived, where a maternity unit had to close at Batemans Bay Hospital and be consolidated in Maruya. I've advocated for the new Level 4 Regional Hospital for at least the past 5 years. I've advocated for improvements at South East Regional Hospital in Bega as a matter of equity. I've advocated and achieved young persons' health, mental health services with Headspace at Batemans Bay, and then locally here with perinatal services for early childhood care and early pregnancy care with Tuross and Gidger. Is that 1 minute? 1 minute, thank you. I took the move to politics because despite all these clinical aspects, I was unable to really achieve any significant change in healthcare particularly. And healthcare, when you see the social determinants of that, involve not only health, but housing, income, employment, social interaction, and what are the major issues that we have in our community, all of those things. So these are the highest priorities for our community. I expect to be involved in government to lead to policy that goes over a significant period of time, not a intermittent promise in pre-election phases. I'll advocate for these as your representative in the local government, and I hope to do that with honesty and integrity and transparency. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to Peter Hagar of the Greens.
Good evening. I've got a prepared statement and I'm going to read it out because it's easier. We can be more chatty later. My name is Peter Hagger and I'm the Greens candidate in the election. I want to talk to you tonight about knowledge. Knowledge of the world and our place in it. Knowledge of the tumultuous times we face. Knowledge of human limits, but also knowledge of human capabilities. Knowledge that the technology we develop to shape the world often ends up being the conduit through which the world shapes us. Science is a powerful mechanism for gathering knowledge, but so is art, story, song, culture and community. Knowledge is stories told by mothers to their children, by elders to their communities. Talking of knowledge rather than science opens a space to hear the knowledge possessed by the peoples of the UN nation. Knowledge that enabled them to thrive in this place for countless generations. Knowledge that may prove vital, knowledge that may prove vital in the immense struggles we face. I stand in awe of the knowledge of the predicament that science has uncovered of our predicament that science has uncovered in my lifetime. This knowledge just keeps building layer upon layer upon layer. The knowledge that the Earth systems are feeding back to us. Knowledge that treating the planet as a resource to keep extracting must stop if life is to continue. The fires of Black Summer are a new source of knowledge. We now know that the border fire that threatened Eden and took out the chip mill started when lightning struck State Forest in Victoria. And we know that it sped through the most intensely logged forest in Australia. We know that the Currawong fire that caused so much devastation in the northern part of our electorate started when lightning struck damaged forest in the Currawong State Forest. And we know that the Badger fire that scarred Cobargo, destroyed 422 homes, took human lives and left so many more in disarray, started when lightning struck Slash, piles of pushed up branches, bark and twigs in a compartment of the Badger forest that was logged sometime between May 2019 and about 3:30 in the afternoon on December 27th, 2019. We know from forest ecologists that the chance of a crown fire in forest logged 15 years prior is 7 times more likely than crown fire in old forest. We know that logging destroys the canopy, dries the soil, results in thick, single-storey flammable regrowth that makes intense fires more likely. And we know that all of this is greatly exacerbated by climate change. We also know what actions we need to take in order to start to put ourselves back in balance with the planet's life systems. We know that it's still possible, but we must act now. I'm asking you to vote one Greens in this election to send a message to our leaders and to the major parties that you want decisions based on knowledge rather than ideology, faith, or the demands of big political donors. But I want more than your vote. Both the major parties have us on a trajectory for too much warming. Both the major parties are ignoring the knowledge that forest ecologists are uncovering. Both the major parties are putting our marine environment at risk by treating it as a resource to be exploited. I'm asking you to get active. If you can find a group in your area, meet up with them. If you can't find one, set one up. A thriving future filled with joy is still possible, but we must act now.
And this is Karen Gieselhardt.
It's Geiselhardt. Giesel sounds undignified, I think. I'm Karen Geiselhardt, and I represent the Sustainable Australia Party. I will also read out my statement and chat later. Sustainable Australia Party is an independent community movement from the political centre with a positive plan for an economically, socially, and environmentally sustainable Australia. We support a science and evidence-based approach to policy. We have broad policy platform. I urge you to look at it online. It's very easy to look at, and it's very comprehensive. For starters, Sustainable Australia Party is campaigning to stop overdevelopment, protect our environment, and stop corruption. A bit about myself. I have been a teacher, an academic, a climate change presenter. As a journalist in the federal government, I saw all too clearly how transparency and accountability can go missing. I'm probably not the first person who did a PhD to get out of the public service. I've also been a cheerleader, a yoga teacher, and a go-go dancer, but that was a long time ago. I've moved on. I've been coming to the South Coast pretty much all my life, and I'm standing for the Sustainable Australia Party because I love the South Coast. And the Sustainable Australia Party has policies that point the way to the future that I want to live in. We do not want to see this beautiful region become like parts of the North Coast. We can't stand still and let change wash over us. We know we're in a time of enormous change. But when our environment is diminished by ugly developments with horrible consequences, when affordable housing becomes a memory, when necessary health care is not available to us when and where we need it, much less the housing for the healthcare workers, mind you, and when public goods like education and training go missing, our democracy itself needs repair. That's why we are very keen to develop more transparent policies to make the state government hold local councils to account. I'm also in the SES in Moruya, and I know there are, and I believe in the volunteer sector so much. I believe in the arts sector. I believe in a holistic approach. There are important issues to discuss this evening, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm fully aware of all of them, because I've only been doing this for a week now. However, I assure you, I'm a very fast learner, and I believe that the values and the policies of the Sustainable Australia Party are what we need to face the challenges of our age, including climate change. I therefore ask that you put me, number 1, Karen Geiselhardt, Sustainable Australia Party, and let me rip. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Fiona Kotfoys. I'm the Liberal candidate for this seat. First of all, may I pay my respects to the traditional owners of this land, the Yuin people, and to all those whose hearts are in the land. This is also my country. I was born here. I was born in Dignams Creek and grew up here. I quite literally have one foot in the Bega Valley and one in Urubadala. Our farm is on the divide of the catchments between Wallaga and Tuross. This is my home. When I finished school here, I had to leave for my study and for work. While I was away, I worked as a teacher for my initial career. I worked in coastal environments as an environmental specialist, and I worked to look at government service delivery and how it could be improved across a whole range of sectors. As soon as satellite internet became available, I was able to move back to my family farm in Dignams Creek, set up the satellite dish, set up a caravan, and I could work overseas from here and do whatever I needed to do. And that's what I did. Now, what I realised is that while I had been away, little had changed for young people. They still had to leave when they wanted to study and for work. There were few opportunities here. The skills that I had gained while I was away were the skills that I needed to be able to apply here to change things, so that in the future, our young people are able to make a choice as to whether to stay or to leave. And that's why I went into Parliament, or to try to go into Parliament. That's what drives me, the future for our next generation. For me, community is really important. I was a Lifeline counsellor for 10 years, RFS for 15, Oxfam director, and a whole range of other things that I still continue. And that's what really drives me, giving back to my community. For me, what I want to see is that we continue on the great work that Andrew Constance has done, that we continue to build our roads, our bridges, that we continue to build on skills transfer and skills development, the work that's been done at Bega and at Bateman's Bay, that we continue to improve our health, like the level 4 facility that is health facility being built at Moruya. That's what I want to see, and that's what I'll continue to do. For young people, we need an integrated approach, local government, state and federal, to deal with housing and mental health issues. They are some of the things I want to work on. We need to focus on recovering and rebuilding, and that's what I will do. I am the only candidate who can be an experienced voice in government for you. Thank you.
Hello.
So can I just make a point that Jeffrey does have an exemption for not wearing a mask, so you know.
Hi, my name's Jeffrey Hawkins. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting many of you. I must say that standing here, it's a very different view from yourselves looking up. I look across here, we have choices, and that is why I threw my hat in the ring. I'm not very good at speeches. I'm going to make a mess of it. I'm sure that if any of us were standing here, we'd make the same. We haven't been through this before. This is all new for me, and this is going to be new for us. I'm not here to talk politics. We need to change our thinking. This is not politics. This is a 12-month temporary job application, because we have to go through this whole process in 12 months again. I'm from a project management background. I don't make promises. I give you a list of things and say, this is the end results of what we need to achieve in 12 months. As I said, I can't make promises, but as part of the application, they said, what do you want? I said, okay, fair enough, let's have a look. Job security for local businesses. I talk to people every day. They want to get back to work, and it shouldn't be hard. Working with Shire councils to address housing shortages and affordable living. Down near at Candelo and Bemboka, I've talked to farmers. They're prepared to have tiny homes on their property on the provision that they can give the people who live there a job. Doesn't seem hard. Work with local community support programs, develop sustainable eco-technology, support creative arts. These are all achievable. Not by looking at me and saying, what am I going to do to fix it? But looking around. Every single one of us is part of a community. And I'm not smart enough for 70,000 people. But 70,000 people are smart enough to get this done. So I'm here. I can't promise you the world, but look around. You've got friends, you've got neighbours. Every single one of us can reach out to each other. So without taking too much more time, I think we all need an explanation. In front of me is 2 books. This book is why I'm here. It's the Australian Constitution. The first 3 words, whereas the people. Right? This is on every single one of us, not just me. And of course, we have said about the mask mandates. I know you won't approve, but I believe in giving people a choice. And this is the truth, and some people may not like it. A mandate is a written command given by one person to another, and it has no authority unless the second person agrees to it. For 2 years, I've been walking around and I haven't seen a smile. For 2 years, as far as I know, people have suffocated. But you have a choice, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you to the candidates. We're going to start with some governance questions, which are about how candidates would operate if elected. These questions come from a strong community interest that a Bega Eurobodalla is aware of, that goes beyond local issues and party politics to how a candidate would work for and with the community. The context is that since the last state election in 2019, this community, along with others, has been through the final stages of a prolonged drought, catastrophic and devastated bushfires, floods, and a pandemic unlike anything experienced in our lifetime. With these have come dramatic social, economic, and environmental impacts. The first question I've got relates to this, so there's 3 of these questions, relates to emergency management and preparedness. And the question is, what are the strengths and weaknesses of the current emergency management system and arrangements as they apply in the Bega electorate? So each candidate's got 2 minutes to talk about that. Thanks.
Thank you. We've all lived through that, had that lived experience of the recent, very recent, 2 years ago, disaster. My experience was working to defend the Eurobodalla District Hospital clinically and physically, in fact. And it was evident at that time the lack of coordination within the health system of trying to coordinate a clinical emergency response via a team based in Queanbeyan, very remotely. So we had 2 fire fronts which threatened us. There was a different response at each time. What was very evident when everyone evacuated to the Maria showground, that there was no disaster planning there. There were toilets with no hand washing facilities. Our biggest concern was that there would be an outbreak of gastroenteritis and that would overtake the whole hospital. I've submitted to the New South Wales Bushfire Inquiry and to the Commonwealth Royal Commission into Disaster, suggesting issues how we deal with public health management at that time, but it was simple as providing energy. So how much diesel did you have? What was that diesel running? We had the issue of it wouldn't run a generator to supply a CAT scanner. We had monetary issues. It was a cash industry at that time. You know, if you didn't have any money, you couldn't get it out of the ATM. So there's cash supply. There is the actual physical defence with bushfires in terms of coordinated response with appropriate vehicles that are safe for our firefighters, as well as being effective. It should basically be a military grade type of fire engine that could not be damaged at that time. Thank you.
You want to repeat your
The question is, what are the strengths and weaknesses of the current emergency management system and arrangements as outlined there?
Okay, the reason I decided to stand as a candidate is because this is the first state election since the Black Summer climate fires, and they were climate fires. There's a couple of issues here. So you've heard my speech already about knowledge and where the fires came from, how they started and why they spread. There's a holistic approach that needs to be taken. We need a better relationship with our forests, ongoing, all the time. We need a better relationship with nature more generally. There's a New South Wales coronial inquest into the Black Summer fires, and that's ongoing. I'd encourage people to have a look at that online if you get a chance. It's really quite illuminating. There's opportunities to put fires out faster if we have better resources. We need better resources, we need better attack systems, we need better monitoring systems. The fire that came across the border, that wasn't spotted by anyone. That was only seen by satellite because they couldn't see it because of the smoke. We need technology, we need to deploy the best technology we can, but we need a better relationship with the forests. The UN people tell us that fires have always started on the escarpment, and they knew that and they dealt with the escarpment country. We need people on country. The UN people are telling us that they need to do more cultural burning. We need to look at that, but we need to do it in light of the science. We need forest ecologists explaining how we need a better understanding of the forest, and we need to be in forest. We need to stop treating nature as other and us as other, attacking culture. We need to realise that we're always embedded in nature. When it comes to the pandemic, we keep hearing people talk about it as a 1 in 100-year event, as if there is somebody out there doling out pandemics. This isn't a 1 in 100-year event. The pandemic itself is a product of the way we live. It's a product of the way we move and our product of the way we interact with our planet.
Thank you. Well, I actually joined the SES because of climate change, because I went and said, you know, would you like me to do a presentation about climate change? They said, we're operational. We deal with floods and storms and stuff. And there began a journey of great learning. They have enormous knowledge. I actually am trying to find someone at the moment who will help me do a Aboriginal burn on my property to protect it. I think we need that knowledge too. I also see that I think they are... Okay, good. I know when I first came down after the fires, because I evacuated in the first round of them, and when I came down, I was sobbing the whole time from Braidwood to Maruya. the mental health impact of all this has been enormous, and I wasn't even directly affected. It's just, it's there, it's in our blood. We're really suffering with climate change. I know they are trying to coordinate emergency services. I know it was a very horrible thing during the fires. It wasn't well coordinated. I think they're talking about having better communication between all the services, and I think that's very important. But what I see in the SES, which also helps during, they do storm and flood, but mostly, and road crash and a whole lot of other things, but they're mostly old people. They're my age or older, and we need recruits, and we need that community, we need that cohesiveness, and we need the volunteers, and we need to protect our environment in very, very powerful ways that we are not even beginning to address. And we need to redefine growth to value and measure the things that actually are going to make us resilient. And I hope we can do it.
Thank you. As an RFS volunteer for 15 years, an Oxfam director who responds to disasters in an international context, and somebody who's worked in international development and evaluated disasters like the response to the tsunami in Aceh, cyclones in Samoa, that's what I'm basing my comments on. So we have great plans. The RFS every 5 years develops the plans for what's going to happen to reduce hazards. The problem is those plans aren't well implemented. There is no point in having a plan unless you actually implement it. We didn't anticipate anything like the disaster that we had with Black Summer, with the scale of the disaster. So our response plans, both for things like Black Summer, for major floods, and for the pandemic, don't anticipate the scale that we have here in Australia. And we need to change our thinking in that context, as we do overseas. In an international development context, when there is a disaster, every international agency knows what their responsibility is going to be when they go into Samoa, Kiribati, Indonesia. It's agreed with the government in advance. We need to look at a similar situation so that every agency that is involved, every volunteer agency, has already worked with councils and identified what their responsibility is and how they're going to provide the support. That way we don't have 20 organisations coming in with emergency housing and nobody coming in with food or clothing. A much better strategy. Again, that's on the planning side. We have a strength in our volunteers in all of our service organisations. That is one of our biggest strengths. We have a strength in our community and how we as a community respond to disasters of all forms. The weakness is that our system often doesn't recognise that. So community-driven emergency evacuation centres were not accepted and supported. We need to change that. Thank you.
I would love to tell you I have great plans on international coordination for communications and all the rest of it, but the long and short of it was, when my friends were getting their houses burned, I was at home in the lounge room with my son, sleeping on sleeping bags because I had a family of 5 under my roof. The good news is I got to cook more than what I usually do. Basic community reaching out to each other. The stories I heard, the horrors of those times, you can't imagine unless you live it. I can't really answer what our major strategy might be, but as I said, I've got 70,000 brains out here. Together, you're a lot more smarter than what I am, and I'm sure that as a community, we can have an answer. I'll keep it brief. Thank you.
Okay, the second question, it's about an impact we've seen across the community, which is a loss of trust and faith in governments and the political system, and we hear this a lot in our community. So this is directed at the candidates, asking them, what would you do, if elected as our local member, to improve the community's trust in how our state and electorate is governed?
Thank you. Look, we would have, personally, as your local representative, I'd be here. You'd have a situation where you have transparency. I would be honest with the community. Forums like this are essential from Tuross to Eden, basically. I'd have a consensus-based approach to negotiating with issues, and I'd be accountable for all those. I think that many times our politicians go to Sydney and remain anonymous. People would be approached. I've already experienced the number of emails that you get from people with issues. So it'd be a matter of dealing with all aspects of the community. You don't perform government for the 49% or 51%. You perform it for the bell-shaped curve. I think that's been lost. It removes a sort of equity and inclusion in government, and I must say that again, as I mentioned earlier, people want policy that extends through the term of the government, so not something that you only hear at the end of every fourth year. So we work with that across all policy issues forthcoming. Thank you.
I'm a member of the New South Wales Greens. Consensus decision making is what we do. It's deeply in our DNA. Grassroots deliberative democracy. That means the people that are involved in the people that get to make decisions are the people that are affected by decisions. There is no leader of the New South Wales Greens, and if you go onto our website, there are no captain's picks on policies. Policies are always developed in consensus by people in consensus reacting to knowledge. It's the knowledge that needs to be in charge, not people. And we need to bring that back to communities. So you can do that by getting a group of people together. Citizens' assemblies are being used and tried. I'm a big fan of citizens' assemblies. I'm a big fan in grassroots deliberative democracy. You need big health systems, you need big environment systems, but they need to be controlled from the ground. And we need to include the UN people in that as well. The UN people have knowledge going back thousands of years. They have a connection to country still in this place. I've been talking to them. Talked to someone from Wallaga Lake the other day. They're still living out of the sea. They still have things to show us. They still talk. They're talking to me about how the fires start on escarpment. Like I said, you get to use that knowledge by talking to people in community, in place. Consensus decision making, like I said, it's in our DNA as a Green. So.
I think in my opening statement I said democracy itself, the processes needs repair, just like an old bridge or something like that. The governance structures are kind of like the operating system for our society. And a few weeks ago I attended a meeting, sort of consultation at the Eurobodalla about their climate change resilience plan. And it had some nice things in it, but there was no mention of housing, there was no mention of transport, there was no mention of education, and there was no mention of food security. Now, how can you plan for climate change resilience without bringing in those factors holistically? And again, the problem was that plan was drafted by somebody in council, and it wasn't a bottom-up thing from the community. So you can, from my work as a researcher, I know that you don't need 50 feet to find the squeaky floorboard. You'll find it as soon as you walk over it. People will squeal. The areas where transparency is not apparent. I mean, I looked at the Kyla Lake thing today online that someone sent me, and from the council documents, it's actually really hard to work out exactly what the hell is going on or being proposed. There's a few little gaps there. So transparency and good governance and fighting corruption, because there's the gray corruption, not just the bags of money being passed around. It's the kind that happens in other kind of ways. These are things that require ongoing effort, pretty much like workers' rights. We're never going to hang on to our workers' rights if we don't keep fighting for it. And to improve, if we can improve the transparency, improve the governance, stamp out corruption through digital sunshine, then we have a chance of also fighting overdevelopment and inappropriate development and getting the resources put where we want them. Thank you.
I believe that it starts with me as an individual. So what I've already done is enlisted 4 friends who know me and have known me for a long time. They know my values, and they hold me to my values. They cover a whole range of different political spectrums. We don't vote the same. We have interesting discussions over dinner. But what I have asked them to do and what they have committed to do is to hold me true to my values. And I have committed to them that I will listen when they tell me I am no longer true to my values, even if we disagree with the end result. But your values and being true to your values are what matters. And that for me is critical. It starts with me as an individual, it starts with your member as an individual, rather than with somebody else. I believe in talking and to listening to people. So I have already door-knocked over 1,000 homes across this electorate in the last few weeks. I have rung quite a lot as well and spoken to them and heard what their concerns are and shared what I believe. I will go to any group that asks me and I will listen to their concerns. And if somebody's invited me and I've missed out saying yes, then I apologise. Somewhere it's got drowned in the hundreds of emails and messages I get each day. I respond to every phone call, message, email, WhatsApp message that I get. I do not block anybody on my Facebook unless you are rude, crude, disgusting, and I give you one message as a warning and then you get blocked, because I don't think Facebook and social media should have that, or unless you are disparaging of others and third parties. For me, it's about transparency as well. Ask me about that one afterwards. Thank you.
Trust in governance, I guess that's a pretty big one, isn't it? 2 weeks ago, if someone had have said to me, how do you trust your government? I would have said easy, hang a lot of them. And I'm sure that many of us here over the last 30 years, 40 years, I'm sure we've all thought the same. I'm not going to say that I'm perfect, but I will tell you this. I live everything by hand. Do no harm, cause no loss, in all things be honourable, respect rule of law and respect the freedom to choose. Everything I do has to be black and white and you have to be able to see it. It's that simple. That's how you trust someone. Now, the other thing, trust has to be earned. Has our trust been earned over the last 50 years? Mine hasn't, which is why 2 weeks ago I would have answered the way I just did. But the problem is, I'm sitting here now, which means if I don't earn your trust, I'm the one that should be out the back getting hung. And it's very simple. We have a job to do. There's so many people, so many ideas, so much help for each other. All you need is a voice. And I'm learning real fast on how to talk. But thank you.
I'm going to move down here because I don't think it's a good idea to always start from from the same person, so I'm going to mix it up a bit. So the third and final question on governance, it's about equity and fairness in how government funds and services are managed and allocated. In the last few years, there have been a lot of reports about grants allocation and pork barrelling in New South Wales. In this electorate, we have seen $8 million go to a project that was ranked number 72 by an independent panel over a project that was ranked number 1 by the same panel but received no funding under this scheme. The projects were for the Batemans Bay Pavilion Theatre and the Bega Regional Gallery upgrade. So it's a question, that's an example. The question is, what changes should be made to how grants funding is decided to improve grant allocation?
I don't know, but I think a lot of us don't know either. Who decides who gets what? We have no transparency at the moment, so we can't make that answer. I've listened to some of the people going, oh, we've done this and we've done that. But the question always remains, but where did the money go? Kirsty McBain, 2 weeks ago, we've spent $95 million on bushfire relief. Yeah, but where did it go? I mean, I know that that was 2 years ago that all that happened, but even in the last 3 months, I'm still helping my friends chop down wood so they can build a house and put a roof over themselves and their kids. I don't know where the money went. Everyone sitting out there, everyone who sees this, everyone who hears it, we, the people, are the ones who should decide where the money goes. Right? Not me, not anyone committee, not some bookkeeper somewhere that's hidden behind a mask of anonymity. We, the people, should decide what is a priority for us and where the money goes. Thank you. Thank you.
I can tell you what I'd like to see. What I'd like to see is a mechanism where communities decide their priorities. It's what I do in international development. I work with communities. There are strategies that use and mechanisms that you use that communities can determine the priorities for their community, and then you put the value against it and you see where the investment is going to produce the best outcomes for that community based on that community's priorities, not somebody else's. That is what I would like to see happen. And that is, to be honest, what I'll be working to achieve. Whether I can, I don't know. But it's what I'd like to see done. It also means that it is the community who has, because it's they who have chosen, if it's not something that they wanted in the end and they decide something else would be better, it was their choice. It stops competition between different projects in a community and divisions that I have seen in communities. But I would also like to see the whole grant process simplified. You spend a lot of time writing grant applications that are unsuccessful. There is some really bad practice where organisations will see that there is a grant and try and write a proposal to match the grant, rather than say, this is what we actually want, and not apply if the grant doesn't suit it. We can make things much more efficient and much less work for communities. Those are some of the things I would like to see. I'd like to see the time frames for grants longer. A lot of the time frames are unrealistic in terms of implementing the grant and getting it done well. We all know that. Any of you who've been involved in a grant know that. The process to get it lengthened and changed is difficult. Those are things that I will be working to change. I know what it's like and I know how we can do it. Thank you.
I should stand up too. I don't know a lot about the grant process, but I do know that the Office of Local Government on a state level is kind of failing in its job to hold local councils accountable. And there should be like an open, publicly available database of all the process that is going through on these sorts of grant applications, etc., and where the money's going and what it gets used for and where donations came from. There's a whole range of things where I think the state government needs to take more of a leadership role in holding local councils, where a lot of the money gets spent, etc. What we've seen in New South Wales state government seems to be incapable of holding themselves accountable, much less anyone else. So I think that's a big problem. And I think that's something where it just has to be hammered away and strengthen the state government processes. And for example, the Maruya bypass, who the hell planned that? And why is it not going to go directly to the hospital if that's the case? and what is going on there? And who talked to the local community to get that outcome? I'd like to know. Okay, well, there's a lot to be found out.
Transparency. Transparency. Since the last state election, the Liberal Party lost the balance of power in the upper house. So we've been able to find out a lot of stuff. David Shoebridge, working with the Shooters and Fishers, working with Animal Justice Party and working with the opposition, has been able to find out stuff they couldn't before. We need more transparency, and we need better politicians. We had a Deputy Prime Minister that called himself, what was it? Pork Barrelara, yeah. We've had a Premier saying this is just part of the process. This can't be part of the process. We need transparency in politics. We need to get corporate money out of politics. We need to get corporate donors out of politics.
Well, I've heard that you never tell anyone that you're applying for a grant, and that institutes this highly competitive nature. The problem is often the grants are so hidden within the paperwork that no one really knows what's available. We have the examples of the bypass, as mentioned, the PAV, as it's referred to. There's no transparency about who else is applying for the grants. A typical example here is the failure to take up a radiation oncology grant, which was promised by both parties but declined by the local health district. So it's our money. These grants should be clear to you that they're available, who is applying for them, and who succeeded and for what reasons. So how it's distributed, I think that is a responsibility of our government to provide that to media so that people know where your money's going, basically.
Thanks, Michael. We've now got to get some questions from Max Castle, from Tuross Head on the Eurobodalla Hospital. There's 4 questions. We'll put the first one to the whole panel. The next 3 are probably not answerable by the whole panel, so we'll just start with the first one. Max, if you could do that first.
Thank you, Chair. 4 questions relate to the proposed hospital for Eurobodalla Shire. Will you support a level 4 hospital opening in 2025 within Eurobodalla Shire? Has the land been purchased for the hospital? Is funding approved to level 4 hospital standard? Will the hospital include adequate staff levels, nurses' quarters and patient residential accommodation upon opening?
So, the first question is, will you support a level 4 hospital opening in 2025 within the Eurobodalla Shire?
Could you just repeat that again, sorry?
Will you support a level 4 hospital opening in 2025 within the Eurobodalla Shire?
I think you know the answer to that. That's what I've been campaigning for the past 5 years. We have a situation where the Leader of the Opposition, Chris Minns, committed to that in November last year. We have a situation where the Health Minister responded to one of the many petitions which is being delivered from our community saying the hospital would not open with level 4 services, and that was responded in late December, and now we have a backflip from the Minister for Health saying it would. So my position, my party's position is quite clear that this hospital will open with level 4 services. There is a transition period that's necessary. The current close observation unit, which was recommended 5 years ago, has only just started functioning. That is a transition, if you think of it as going from level 3 to level 3.5, and then opening to level 4. It requires recruitment, it requires funding, it requires adequate nursing staffing ratios. So without that work starting now, and let me say a shovel hasn't been put in the ground on the proposed site as yet, we have to get the site built, we have to then get the staffing models of care all initiated to cover that period. That requires management, it requires leadership from within and without the hospital service.
So this part of the question is just simply, will you support a level 4 hospital opening in 2025 within the Shire?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I will support it, but it has already been committed. So the money is there and it is committed.
With the current system, do you believe that it's possible? I have doubts. I would like to see it, but I'll see it when I see it.
Thank you. Okay, so the second and third and fourth questions, and I don't think all candidates can answer this, but Fiona may have a better insight to this. Michael might have some insight as well. I don't want to put the candidates under ridiculous pressure when you don't have the information. The next question was, has the land been purchased for the hospital? And then the third was, is funding approved to level 4 hospital standard? So did you have a comment on those, Fiona?
So the negotiations on the land purchase are underway. The site has been developed, identified and agreed, and those are expected to be finalised by about April. The other question was about the funding. The funding has been committed, it has been budgeted, it is there. Did you want us to do the fourth question, or is that you holding it?
Yeah, that's fine. Will the hospital include adequate staff levels, nurses' quarters and patient residential accommodation upon opening?
So the staffing levels, yes, they are being developed and will be what is required to deliver level 4 services. The upgrade of those staff has already commenced. For example, with the close observation unit, the staff will be going to Canberra, to Bega and to one of the hospitals in the Shoalhaven to upgrade their skills. That has commenced. The number of nurses has already been increased, nurse registrars. I think it's 12 off the top of my head. So that's already in process. In terms of nurses' quarters, yes, there is accommodation for health professionals on site being developed. In terms of patient accommodation, will that be there? I'm not sure, but it is something I have asked, and it is certainly something that I will fight to have included, because as somebody who has had to travel with my mum, my dad, particularly mum when she had her stroke, I'm very conscious of the difficulties when you are travelling with your parents or elderly people or any member of your family and they need care and you are at a distance from home, or children. So yes.
Michael, did you have any comment, or did anyone else have a comment on those questions?
As far as the purchase of the land is concerned, you despair when an announcement of the site is made in November or December 2020 and the owner of the land doesn't receive a letter of offer until 12 months later. You also despair when the owner meets you outside for coffee and tells you that there's been no purchase and still at the beginning of this month. That's not commercial in confidence, that's the reality. So that's what we're dealing with the current government. So a promise given there. The money is enough. $260 million is enough to build the bricks and mortar of that hospital. It's how it run. So you need something like $90 million a year to run a $260 million hospital. Will the government support that? Well, on their current record, not. Chris Minns has committed to, and Ryan Park have committed to negotiating nursing ratios for which vary from ward to close observation to intensive care. That's for your safety, and that's also for the safety of our nurses. I have spoken to Rotary clubs from Bateman's Bay to Narooma on the issue of carers accommodation. The model that the carers accommodation took in the development of the South East Regional Hospital was that community service groups, businesses got together and made these carers accommodations take place. We've already had discussions about, which we'll come up to later with housing shortage, of the necessity for medical, nursing and allied health accommodation in the area. It doesn't necessarily have to be on site of the hospital.
Thanks, Michael. The next question is really, the headline is coordination and consultation in relation to major infrastructure projects. Relates to the hospital in part. It's Deb Stevenson from the Moruya Bypass Action Group.
Thanks, Bernie. I'll address the speakers, so sorry if I turn my back to you. The Moruya Bypass and the Urbadella Hospital were announced by the government in the lead up to the last election. That's 2019. And since then, the community has been trying to obtain the detail behind these promises and understand how they will work together. Transport for New South Wales preferred bypass route will take ambulances coming from the north 2 kilometres past to the hospital site, from where they will have to turn back north along the old highway to the hospital site, which can only be accessed by crossing the highway again and turning across southbound traffic. Health Infrastructure New South Wales and Transport for New South Wales have supposedly been talking to each other, but I don't think they're speaking the same language and they aren't listening to the community, I can assure you of that. If elected, what will you do to ensure that major infrastructure projects are delivered in a coordinated and strategic way that genuinely involves the community and delivers the best results for the people of this electorate? And more specifically, will you support reopening the whole consultation process for the Moruya Bypass, which is a disaster?
Do you want? You can keep walking with those two.
Absolutely. The Urbadella Hospital side, the bypass, the recently announced emergency precinct which will be set up they all have to be coordinated. There's great concern on the route of the bypass in terms of access to all of those facilities. Obviously there's all the other aspects that people are aware of, the environmental impact, the acquisition of land, the effect on our community. You don't put a bypass in to kill something, you put a bypass in to keep it alive, as we do with our hearts. So this plan has to really go back to the community, and I support that entirely, having seen both the clinical services plan for the hospital, having seen the bypass routes, and also having been involved with the discussions about the emergency precinct. It goes back to what we've been saying all along, is certainly governance and transparency in our decisions. Thank you.
Transparency and community decision making. Grassroots, deliberative democracy. But more than that, we need to start thinking about a transport system that deals with climate change. We can't just keep running great big highways through it. In Europe, they spend 20% of their road budget on pedestrian and cycling. We spend 1%. So the Greens have got a plan to increase spending on cycling as well, so that people can cycle. I've cycled to work from my place, 25 k's from Brogo to Bega, down the Princes Highway. I've done it twice. It's absolutely terrifying. There is absolutely no reason we couldn't be doing more of that. We've got e-bikes coming, or e-bikes available now. The Liberals sort of half-funded a cycle path between Bega and Tafe. It's too difficult, and it should be more holistic, and it shouldn't just be about whacking a great big highway through everything.
Well, I support everything that Peter and Michael have said, certainly. And I've been waiting for a long time for the bicycle path to Maruya Heads to be finished. There is that one little strip that you got to go on the right, and you got to cross over the road a couple times. Isn't that silly? You know, the hospital bit, the infrastructure, that got to get that right. We can't let that go the way it is on paper now. It's just insane. It's so impractical. And it's going to cost lives if ambulances have to go around and cross the traffic and all that. It's very, very important that these things be done to meet community needs, not whatever is going on in the state government. And they have to be just jump up and down and like terriers until it gets right and until the community is actually brought into it. And it's like that with a whole lot of different things. Education is another one, but maybe there's another question on that because that's another thing that's been badly neglected by the state government in the Tafe system. It's so important. So let's see what happens.
In terms of the bypass, can I assure everybody at the moment, and I've gone back and I've checked before I met with the Maruya Bypass Community Group and had consultations with them, the decision as to the route has not yet been made. I have confirmed that with the department because I was told by many people it had, and they have assured me, and the Minister's office has assured me that decision has not yet been made. So they have been doing a lot of studies and a lot of work. There is a report that I understand from the letters that have been sent to various people that will be coming out in February that provides information about the different options and about what they have found. The consultation from my perspective last year is completely inadequate. I believe that's probably compounded by COVID. As we all know, COVID didn't help any of us talk. Talking on Zooms and having meeting on Zoom or anything like that is not the same. So my position is that when the report comes out in February, what needs to happen is that report needs to be made available for everybody, and then a consultation process needs to be implemented at that point. We kind of need to put things on hold for about 6 months, go back, do more consultation, so that the people from RMS can actually hear the concerns and then that they can investigate those concerns and present the information and the facts and the data back to the community so that it is all out there as to all of the information and all of the data on which an informed decision about the best route will be made. That's my position. It has to be based on data and an informed decision and high levels of consultation. In terms of strategic planning, I'm a great believer in strategic planning. I get deeply concerned when things are done in an ad hoc manner, and I would like to see more strategic planning about how things will fit together in the long term, and I will support that.
I don't know what I can say. I think everyone at some point in time believes that we have the best intentions to get things done and get things done the right way, but it doesn't work out that way. From my background, we need to know from the people what is the end result that you need. Because once we know what you need, then we can work backwards and see how to put things in place. The question about this bypass, I'm astounded. I'm absolutely astounded. For myself, I actually live too far away for that to actually be an immediate problem for me, but it's obviously an immediate problem for yourselves. With 70,000 brains, I'm sure we can find an answer. That's all I can say for you. We need everyone to have a say.
Tafe's going to ask the next question. It's about the Princess Highway local traffic question. Tuross.
So this is a question from the Progress Association. Now that the interstate bus passenger operations has been removed from the Princess Highway and relocated into the commuter car park here at the Tuross turnoff, if elected,
would you give your commitment to supporting the Tuross Progress Association in its proposed submission to the New South Wales Minister for Roads for grants funding for the design and construction of a left-hand slip lane with a dedicated left-turn stop sign for vehicles exiting Hector McWilliam onto the highway? This additional vehicle lane will certainly help to alleviate the traffic choke point at the T intersection that we have.
For me, that's an easy question. The answer, though, is a bit more difficult. Why wasn't it included in the original design? It was. Okay, then I suppose for the community, what the next question is, why is it not there? If it was included, why was it not there? I don't have an answer, but I do have the questions.
In this area, there are two intersections which I think are extremely dangerous. One is the Tuross intersection on Princess Highway, and the other is Bingie. I will support the community in advocating and in fighting for changes at both of those intersections. We need to have specialists look at what the best way to do it is and the safest way for our long-term safety. The safety issues for me are paramount. Traffic jams are also really important, and blockages and slow. But for me, the real issue is the safety of those intersections, and we need to do something. You'll have my support.
I support what Fiona said, and also I support what Peter has said, that we need a better look at transport. I know there's a proposal to revisit the rail line feasibility study between Canberra and Eden that the people in Cooma want, and that would link our two electorates. I think it's very important that we do get fewer cars on the road overall, but make them as safe as possible in every way.
If there's an unsafe intersection, I'm not particularly aware of that intersection. Obviously, it needs to be fixed. If it was in the original design and it was removed, then there's questions that need to be answered. Why? We need a better transport system. We are in the midst of climate change. We need more electric car charging networks. We need more public transport systems. We need more cycleways, and it's an opportunity to rethink how communities work and how they fit together. A good transport system can build community connections. A bad transport system just divides people.
Yeah, I have knowledge of the Tuross intersection. With any further planned or proposed development in the Tuross Head region, you're only going to get an increase of traffic there. It's a notorious blind spot with Hill coming up, so I support all the other responses there. That the left-hand turn needs a merging lane. My family and myself would drive the Bingie intersection. I would worry every time my young daughter would be crossing at that time. And most recently, unfortunately, the experience of a fatality there. Basically, I think you need the data to look at where do the accidents happen. They happen at the T intersections. It's always the case. You see what happens. So with an analysis of the actual traffic load coming out of these T intersections, with the geography of the highway at that time, I think we need to analyse each of these spots along the highway for improvement, but obviously with the Tuross Head, that's essential.
The next question is about social and low-cost housing. It's from June Brown, but June couldn't be here this evening. She's unwell, so I'm going to put it to the candidates on June's behalf. June's from Tuross. Her question is about the lack of affordable housing in the Urbadella. This summer we still have people in tents and caravans since the 2019-20 fires, recognising the differing roles of federal, state and local governments, and appreciating that state, local governments and NGOs have a major role in the provision of low-cost housing.
how would you, as candidates, propose to lobby or provide for additional funding specifically for building affordable housing in the Eurobodalla in an area with transport and other facilities where costs for travel to work are not prohibitive?
Thanks. Well, just building the housing as such is not really the answer. There has to be the infrastructure that supports that. There has to be the surrounding transport availability. Our problem is it's many factors. You know, the price of housing's gone up 30% per annum. The cost of rent's going up 15%, 19% per annum. People are being housed out. I see people who are couch surfing, even with severe medical illnesses, and the consequences on them and their children. So our homes are bigger than they should be. There needs to be a wider range of accommodation. Many of us don't need a 4-bedroom house. We'd be happy to downsize. So we need initiatives to look at smaller housing, giving people options to move into that and not into aged care facilities. That people want to remain independent. Some people want to live in a flat by themselves. So we can look at providing social housing by building whatever number of houses we need per year. You know, it could be up to 250 houses as such, accommodations as such. These people pay for that housing out of their social security. Once you give people houses, they will get jobs. Our kids will be able to go to school securely. So it's a great investment in our community to get these people into homes for their physical health, for their mental health, for their education. I think we need to look at particularly innovative models of infilling our major towns like Moruya, Narooma, Batemans Bay. We can't be putting people out onto remote and dangerous blocks.
The Greens support a massive increase in social housing. The Greens support refinancing crisis housing, which is housing is a basic human right. I've got a cafe in Bega. I hire about 15 staff. Young people are losing touch with the dream of owning their own home. The young people that work for me are finding it difficult to afford rent. Like they're renting in seaside towns, and the rental price is being pushed up by Airbnbs and houses that are empty for most of the year. So we need to look at a levy on empty houses. We need to look at infill development, like Michael was saying, and Bega's doing that. So Bega's Bega Council has started doing that so that we can have more housing where the infrastructure is, so that we stop that urban sprawl that's happened all over Australia. And so that because the resources are there. If I look up and down the main street of Bega, there's empty offices up and down the main street of Bega. They used to be houses. 50 years ago, people used to live above those shops. Now, they shouldn't just be going back in there now, but we could redevelop those spaces and we could make vibrant communities. I'd certainly love to live above a busy street space as I head into retirement, and then have touch with community. So we need to rethink our communities and make them vibrant, lively places, and we need to do that now, because this is a crisis. If young people can't afford to rent, then how and they've got jobs, this is really serious. It is ripping at the shreds of our society.
And of course that brings up the what I call the 7 billion elephants in the room, which is population, and the pressures on Australia. And housing is a huge issue. People in Byron Bay say it's just been destroyed by the Airbnb thing. I think we also need to look at the policies that are encouraging investment properties. The negative gearing is part of Sustainable Australia's policy to eliminate the negative gearing and the 50% discount on capital gains for investment properties. And I think we need to look at ways in which we don't all need to own everything, where we could have an eco-village where people could share things that are gadgets that are, what do we all need, a deep freezer and a vacuum cleaner and all those sort of things? Is there nothing we couldn't just share in sort of group housing, group developments? That there's all kinds of things, community housing, if we open up our minds to the possibilities that could exist and that could be done in a very sustainable way, and at the same time look at the creation of jobs, so that the people who are coming here, who are going to need to work in the hospital, get a decent place to live, in a good place. It's such a fundamental human right, and we don't want to wind up living in little horrible boxes with no connections with each other. That's for sure.
There's really three separate issues which are interrelated, which need to be addressed. One is refuge accommodation, one is social housing, and one is accommodation that we either buy or we rent, and having affordable accommodation at that level. Those issues are related, but they are independent and will have separate solutions. The New South Wales State Government has had a review last year into regional housing. That was released in late November, and I would thoroughly recommend everybody read that who's interested in the issue. Urbadala Council made an excellent submission to that. Bega Valley has a report out at the moment into affordable housing that is open for consultation. That's also a really excellent document which provides a range of different options. I've already met with both councils. I've met with many of the community organisations who are involved, particularly in providing social housing and refuges. What we need to do is to develop a range of different strategies for each of those, and I will support that. I've been working with the community in Jindabyne over the last year, and they've developed some different strategies which they've implemented to specifically address the problem of people in winter and getting employees there in winter because they have a problem with winter accommodation. It looked pretty good, but because of COVID, we're not actually sure if it really worked last year or not, but it did look good. There are some other strategies that we can do with modular and mobile houses which we can implement to get some really quick wins into this space. We need to have all three levels of government working together and looking at different strategies and changing some of the planning regulations, particularly at council and at state government level, so that we have greater flexibility. We need to have the federal government looking at different strategies in terms of policy incentives. And I will, and already am, working at all those things. Thank you.
I beg to differ. When was the last time anyone here was homeless? For me, July 2018. Right. I know that the things that they have, the resources available, I know they work. But they don't work enough. Right. I currently work with 3 different community groups. We are looking at what they call eco-villages. We have eco-technology, where you can power a house without an ongoing power bill. You can draw your water from the very atmosphere, and it doesn't have a water bill. People live in tiny homes, right? You only need 2 bedrooms, your outside space, cook a barbecue, right? These are practical solutions, and I'm trying to work with those community groups to make them a reality. This is a chance for us to take this issue and provide a proof of concept that it works, it's affordable, and it will take away the risk of homelessness. I don't want to have to face that again, and I don't think anyone should have to face that. Thank you.
The next question is about the marine environment, and it's Jane Alec.
Thank you, Bernie, and thank you everyone for coming here to give us your views. The public comment on the 130-page draft management plan for New South Wales marine parks has just closed. It's 5 o'clock today. The plan, however, does not give any reassurance that the government is committed to protecting our marine environment, on which tourism and our local economy depends. It has said nothing about restoring the sanctuary zones in which fishing has been allowed for the last 2 years. Additionally, targeted fish populations have been decreasing steadily, and the present government has also been steadily whittling away at the resources and the protection of our marine environment. So my question is, how will you ensure that we have a healthy marine environment for future generations?
I can't speak for the future. I can't speak for our next generation, but I can speak for what we've already managed to do. Again, working with community groups, we have technology available to support our environment and our impact on the environment. One of the concerns that I have to deal with personally is Bega Valley Shire wanting to put a deep water outlet for sewerage. That's like flying to the moon, throwing your space junk on it and walking away. You can't see it, so it doesn't matter. What are they going to do with the future? Right? Our future has been that we don't go back to the moon. What's going to happen to our marine environments? There are always scientific alternatives. There are always brain power. We do have options. These things, there has to be a result. It has to be result driven. We have to know this is the end result. We want a result that protects our environment and is a workable solution for the people. It's a fine line to walk, but someone's got to walk it. Let's give it a try.
My background is as a coastal geomorphologist, and I'm a coastal specialist. It's what I work in. I've been involved in the establishment of marine parks in several countries across the Pacific with communities, and I've also been working with fisheries agencies and ministries for fisheries and natural resources to help them develop their strategic plans for use of the fisheries and protection of the fisheries. What we need to do is have the evidence and make decisions based on the evidence. We need to have a balance between marine parks, recreational fishing, and commercial fishing. I would not want to see commercial fishing at the scale where we're using trawlers, particularly Piscina and Longline, anywhere near here. But we have to have a balance. I eat fish, most of us eat fish. I'm always deeply concerned when we push the fishing to developing countries and we abuse their resources. We have recreational fishers who enjoy fishing, so we have to have areas where they can fish. At the same time, we have to have areas where the marine resources are protected to replenish and to grow, to restock, and to ensure that our resources increase. There are specific areas that can be, that will be, provide greater value in that than other areas. And those decisions need to be based on evidence. Thank you.
Well, we crazy to send a poo out to sea. I have 2 composting toilets. That's pretty good. So I think really we should be harvesting this stuff and turning it into compost. I did to send it out to sea just doesn't seem to make sense. And we need to expand the marine parks. We need to decrease the effluent that comes off farming, which is a major problem on the Great Barrier Reef. We need to carefully monitor fishing stocks and everything that goes along with that. It's a big job, and we need to make sure that the further down the track, Australia is part of all the international agreements that are going to protect areas that are so far safe from development, like Antarctica itself. That treaty is coming up for renewal. All of these things affect the oceans, which are changing at a great rate due to climate change. So that's a very big job that we need to do at all levels of government.
So there was an amnesty put on no take in the sanctuary zones, and the amnesty was announced by the local member in conjunction with the agriculture, the Minister for Agriculture. The Minister for the Environment wasn't here. In fact, the Minister for the Environment at the time went to the media and said he didn't support it. The Minister for the Environment offered to take the local member scuba diving to show him just how valuable the sanctuary zones at Montague Island were.
Are we talking about Constance?
Well, we're talking about Constance. Mr. Constance was invited by Matt Keane to go scuba diving. I don't think it ever happened, and it just sort of disappeared. We need sanctuary zones. We need to stop treating the marine environment like it's an agricultural resource. It shouldn't come under the Department of Agriculture. It should come under the Department of Environment. And then that Department of Environment should be getting feedback from local people on the ground. We need to be talking again to the UN people. I was talking to Rodney Kelly. He said he just can't get. He's a UN member from Wallaga Lake. He just can't get enough fish anymore. There's just not enough around. He wants more protection zones. He wants more sanctuary zones all the way down to the border. So they're asking for it. They want to be involved in it as well. They would like that. There's an opportunity to get those people involved in, so that we develop community processes so that we understand what's going on. There's a lot of disinformation or misinformation that happens because people don't understand what a sanctuary zone means. We need better education, and the government seems to be playing on that. So when the right-wing media say, we need to lift these sanctuary zones because no one can fish, when in fact there are fishing places available. So we need a better education, but most of all, we need to listen to the knowledge, and the knowledge of our marine environments is going to change, and it's going to change fast, and we need to be able to respond.
Certainly, these marine parks are an essential and precious resource that we have. It's something that needs to be shared throughout the community for multiple uses. This is the difficulty that we have that sometimes produces conflict. But the majority of the time, responsible recreational fishermen, responsible conservationists are all working towards the same end. When you refer to the effects on the marine environment, trawling reduces the fish population from where fish reproduce and then come in to benefit both recreational fishermen and also our scuba divers, our kayakers and all the rest that enjoy this environment. So we need to consult, as many of us have said, between all the users in these parks. We need to get the information. One of the ways to get reliable information and separate that from opinion would be to looking at an actual marine education and research centre, which would benefit the whole coast as an attraction, as an academic unit. That information can be shared. We know from the fishermen, such as the people that are harvesting sea urchin at the moment. They're out there, they're under the water, they can be taking photographs and feeding back. So that's a particularly important issue in our region, like dealing with the sea urchin barons that are out there. And definitely the final answer, there's no doubt that sanctuary zones are required. It's the actual number and size of those and where they're located.
Thanks, Michael. Our next question is about education, and particularly about Tafe, and it's from Gabby Harding.
Good evening, everyone, and I'd like to say thanks to the candidates for coming today, this evening, and letting us get to know you a little more. Contestable funding is a model where the dollar follows the student. Tafe New South Wales are supposed to compete with private providers on the same ground for publicly subsidised student dollars. There is no other money that is afforded to Tafe apart from this dollar per student enrolled. That is, there's no recurrent funding per year on year. While public resources flowed to private vocational trainers or VET providers, Tafe institutes were stranded with large amounts of infrastructure. Plus, as the public provider, Tafe have all of the community service obligations. Plus, as the public provider, we, Tafe, provide disability support services, counsellor support services, and library services, to name a few. So this has forced the cash-strapped Tafe system to pare back their offerings. This undermines its standing among students and our community. It's ruining our reputation as a stable skills provider. My question to the panel: do you support providing recurrent government funding for Tafe? If so, how much and over what period of time?
For me, that's an easy one. Right, less than 2 years ago, in speaking with Tafe teachers, Tafe New South Wales was respected internationally. So that's an easy one. The hard one is that I don't believe that Tafe should be separate from the education system. I actually believe that by the time you hit year 10 or possibly year 11, it should be that every student should be having a year of Tafe. Get some practical skills, get some practical experience. Tafe is the one body who actually arranges working on site with all sorts of industries. But Tafe should be the linchpin between students doing their education and getting practical experience. Tafe New South Wales should not be separate to a student's education, it should be part of it. That way you're there year in, year out, and you're always going to be needed.
I'm passionate about technical and vocational education and training. My mum was the head of department in a tech for many years and a tech teacher. My brother has gone through his trades and had his apprenticeships. It's what I'm passionate about. Both I and my husband have our Cert 4 for workplace training and assessment. I've worked in it overseas as well, so I've helped upgrade the technical and vocational education training systems in the Pacific and in Indonesia. And I believe that they are an important part of our education system. I believe that they should have a component of recurrent funding. How much that is, I don't know. You'd need to go through the detail and the period for which it should be. I do believe that all funding should be for a long period, not just in technical and vocational training and the TAFE system. I believe that the longer the period of funding, the greater clarity and the better planning that you can have. One of the problems from my personal perspective that we have at the moment is that our planning cycle is limited to 3 years at most, because you cannot commit funds for the next government because they may well change things. So that quite limits things in terms of recurrent funding. I don't think it's a good model. I'd like to change it and look at having longer funding, because on that basis you make better decisions. So I hope that answers the question.
TAFE is critical to adapting to the changes that are coming ahead for us. We need to be training people in different kinds of things. We need to learn how to repair things. The Sustainable Australia Party has a policy on making things repairable, on having free TAFE and tertiary education. Of course, it should be funded adequately. They should be expanding their courses, not shrinking them. They should have security of longevity in these courses, and we need to be training people to do the kind of things that I know Gabby has done, like teaching people how to grow things. I've taught at Tafe, I've studied at Tafe, I love Tafe, and I think one of the big mistakes this country made was during the Dawkins era when they eliminated the Tafe CAE university model. I thought the CAEs had a good place as well. But Tafe is going to be critical for, if we could just start to learn and pick up the skills we need to adapt to a changing world and a changing climate, and get people who can fix things and make things and build things, wow, we'd be a much smarter country than we are now. That's all.
The Liberal Party ripped $1.6 billion out of Tafe. They've sacked 5,700 staff. 60,000 students have left the Tafe system. The Tafe system is in crisis, and it's not an accident, it's being attacked. We need to ensure that 100% of all state government funding for vocational training goes to Tafe. Pretty straightforward. And my colleague here is right. We need to develop new programs because Tafe is going to be so important in dealing with the issues of restoring environment, restoring climate. More than that, these new learning centres where kids go in and sit in front of a screen discriminate against so many kids that need to learn hands-on. Like I've got a friend of mine who is a great builder, but he just said he couldn't learn in a classroom, he couldn't learn in front of a screen. He needs to learn hands-on. If you're in hospitality, you need to learn hands-on. These new centres are just nonsense. They're just... and the privatisation by stealth that's been happening needs to stop.
Yeah, certainly the need and the neglect of Tafe has been going on for many years. Having lost, nearly 120 training positions, enrolments down by 52% or 2/3 in many areas. The consequence to our economy is the fact that employers don't have the staff that are correctly trained in this situation. So it's been a terrible neglect of that situation. The number of courses, the way that they're taught has been eroded. As mentioned there, the fact that a lot of learning now is virtual rather than hands-on means that employers are telling me that they basically have to retrain these students when they come out. So let me say this, like we have an area of youth in unemployment of 10%, how else are we going to get that up without training these young people in technical and further education, and broadening the actual subject field, getting people trained and accredited and back into it as Tafe teachers. So the right amount of money is what it costs to do that. I can't give you a figure myself.
We've got a question from Leigh Parker. I'm going to have to drag him out from behind his camera.
Thank you. We've been sitting back and listening to for why we should vote for you, vote number one, but I'm really quite interested in voting number 2, number 3, number 4. Where are your preferences going to go? Because we all know that, unfortunately, the result sometimes is driven by the verdict of preferences. So if I could have your preferences, that would be much appreciated.
I get asked that quite often. The answer is very simple. I don't get a say. It's that simple. Every single person who votes has to make their own informed choice from 1 through to 7. It's not my call, it's yours.
My how to vote card has vote 1 Fiona and no preferences. A state election is different to a federal election. You don't have to do preferential voting. You can just vote 1 for whoever you want. You don't have to have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and your vote will be valid. Federal election, it's different. You need to complete every box for it to be valid. I have no allocation of preferences.
New South Wales Electoral Commission told me every box has to be numbered.
And I'm leaving it to Sustainable Australia to determine where they want to place preferences.
The first speaker was right. You get to choose your preferences when you vote. We can give you a direction, but it's your choice. So I would say, if you're planning on voting Liberal, because you've always voted Liberal, vote one Greens and send a message, because the Liberals don't have a climate change policy. If you're planning on voting Labor because you prefer their policies, and I would suggest that you put one Greens and then two Labor, because the Labor don't really have a viable climate change policy. The 2030 target for the Greens for CO2 emission reduction is 80%. Now that sounds extreme, but that's what the Climate Council's calling for. That's what the science is calling for, an 80% reduction by 2030. And 100% reduction by 2040. So if for no other reason, I would suggest that if your choice was one of the major parties, then put one Greens for that reason alone. We will be directing our how to vote, our registered how to vote will have one Green and two Labor, but it is your choice, Leigh.
Thanks, Leigh. I've been out distributing how to vote pamphlets in Maruya and Bateman's Bay today at the pre-poll. Our how to vote card puts vote one Michael Holland, New South Wales Labor. I must say to everyone, you are not committed to that. Everyone should exercise and use their preferences wisely. You need to know the consequences of what you put down as your second to seventh preference.
Thanks. We're almost out of time. I know that Malane had another question for the floor. Then we might have time for one more past that. Did you have another question? Okay, we'll go to Malane and we might end there.
Thank you, Bernie, and thank you for being here and sharing your thoughts with us. As Michael Holland has mentioned before, the Minister, Brad Hazzard, the New South Wales Minister for Health, has demonstrated brilliantly that he can change his mind in about 5 weeks. Also, I remember that the Liberal candidate here today, when she was campaigning for the federal elections, stated that provision of level 4 services for the Eurobodala was really not justified by the Eurobodala population, and that in any case the facilities offered by Bega and Goulburn regional hospitals were very good, and of course Canberra as a hospital, and that's what we needed to be covering our health in Eurobodala. Now, given this, and given that we never know what's going to happen after the election, let's suppose that Liberal take the vote in our electorate. And my question to the Liberal candidate is, after the election, supposing that the New South Wales Health Minister does it again and reverts back to his previous position of opening with level 3, against the wishes of this community, tens of thousands of people telling us they want to open this hospital with level 4. I would like to know what our local member would do if the minister changes his mind to support our community to get a level 4 despite the New South Wales Health bureaucracy refusing to do it.
Well, I actually don't recollect at all that previous statement because Maria wasn't in Eden Monaro. However, making things very clear, the Minister has stated very clearly that it is level 4. The media release is there, he's been videoed, he's recorded, he has stated it very clearly. There will not be a reversal. The media release also identifies what services will be provided at a high level in that facility. There will not be a reversal in that decision. Eurobodalla Hospital is a level 4. He has, at opening, he has committed to that. I am committed to that. I do not make commitments which I do not keep. When I make a commitment, I keep my commitments. Very simple. Thank you.
Any other comments on that? Otherwise, we might... Did you want to say something, Michael? Or?
Unfortunately, in terms of transparency, our problem is we have a clinical services plan which has not yet been released to the community for any consultation, with 12 days to go before a by-election. The history of the Eurobodalla Health Service Clinical Services Plan has been a chameleon, a yo-yo. It's changed shape and size all along. Opening at level 4 is simply a focus on intensive care services. We've seen maternity services going from 7 beds to 6 beds to 3 beds and going up and down like a yo-yo. This is the whole reason that I've lost faith in the New South Wales government, and this is the whole reason why I've taken this step to represent people politically. I've been consistent all along on the campaign for this level 4 hospital. I've called out the New South Wales government on their backtracking and and their equivocation on what will be provided. So I will continue, I have and I will continue to apply pressure on the relevant minister and the government to guarantee that this hospital is what the community has expected.
Thank you, Michael.
I live in Bega, and we've got a big, shiny new hospital. It doesn't guarantee service. I was ill, quite ill, a couple of years ago, and I got an ambulance because I knew if I went into emergency, I could be sitting there for hours. I knew if I went in an ambulance, at least I'd have a bed. I ended up in a chair because, again, a big, shiny building doesn't guarantee resources. We need hospitals that are properly resourced with staff that are properly trained and properly remunerated. It's not just buildings. And it seems that politicians think that health is something you do at election time. It's a building you announce at election time. That's not what a health system is. You need good buildings, but you need staff, and you need staff remuneration and training.
We have one final question.
Yes, it's time for us to finish, but I do have a question, probably best to ask you, Fiona. Would that guarantee of a level 4 opening still happen if you as a Liberal candidate do not get up? Is that funding still guaranteed by the state government?
The funding has been very clearly guaranteed that Eurobodalla is a level 4 hospital. That has nothing to do with the election. It has been guaranteed, and it was guaranteed before. What you need is to have somebody at the table who is able to take your needs and your concerns to the table. And I am able to do that. And that is why you need somebody like me at the table to raise the issues and to ensure that things go forward clearly and any concerns are addressed in terms of Eurobodalla Hospital and other issues. It is critical for our recovery and our rebuilding to have a clear, effective voice at the table. Thank you.
Okay, that's the end of the questions. I'm going to hand the microphone back to Kathy, but I wanted to thank all the candidates for engaging so helpfully in the discussion. So it's been great.